They believed the gods demanded blood, not prayers. In hidden chambers beneath golden palaces, the kings of forgotten empires performed rites that defied heaven itself. Their crowns gleamed under torchlight as sacred knives traced circles of fate. Witnesses vanished, priests spoke in tongues, and the air turned heavy with incense and dread. These were not mere ceremonies. They were bargains with forces older than time, sealed in silence and secrecy. Today, buried beneath ruins and dust, lie the relics of their forbidden devotion. But when unearthed, they whisper once more of what was promised and what was paid. The rituals were not born from cruelty alone. They were born from fear. For ancient kings, power was never secure. Every harvest, every battle, every eclipse was seen as a test from the divine. To fail meant the collapse of an empire. To displease the gods meant death. So they bargained. They carved faith into flesh and bone, believing that sacrifice could buy them another dawn. The high priests promised protection, and the kings obeyed, even as shadows lengthened around their thrones. It was a cycle written not in history, but in terror itself. In every civilization's rise, there was always a moment when reason surrendered to desperation. The rulers who commanded thousands would fall to their knees before unseen gods, whispering in forgotten tongues. In those moments, the line between faith and madness vanished. It was no longer about devotion. It was survival. The sun god, the serpent mother, the keeper of the underworld, all were fed the same offering, the promise of loyalty sealed with blood. Archaeologists once dismissed the ancient accounts as myth, stories meant to frighten the faithful. But new discoveries unearthed beneath forgotten cities tell a darker truth. Beneath every grand palace lay hidden tunnels, chambers lined with the bones of those offered to unseen gods. Carvings depict processions of kings entering the darkness and emerging crowned in flame. The evidence is undeniable. The power of these rulers was not merely political. It was alchemical, spiritual, drawn from rituals that demanded a terrible price. Among the ruins of their empires, we find the echoes of their choices. Idols toppled, temples collapsed, their cities swallowed by sand. Yet their influence endures, etched into the rituals that survived through generations. Even today, fragments of those forbidden rites persist, hidden within modern traditions. What began as blood offerings to the gods transformed into symbols, songs, and prayers. But the origin remains the same. Humanity has always feared the silence of the divine, and kings were merely the first to speak into it. The deeper one digs into history, the closer one comes to a truth humanity tried to bury. The forbidden rites were not isolated incidents. They were a network, spanning continents and dynasties. Each kingdom claimed divine favor, yet all spoke the same language of sacrifice. Across oceans and deserts, kings called to the same unseen presence, offering life to secure eternity. What connected them was not faith, but fear. The fear that their power was borrowed, and one day, the debt would be due. In the city of Atara, once thought to be legend, inscriptions tell of a king who sought to outlive the gods themselves. He built temples deeper than tombs and commanded his priests to bind his soul to the heavens through ritual flame. But in doing so, he invited something that no prayer could contain. When the fires died, the city fell silent, and every name was erased from stone. Only the echoes remain, carved in languages the living can no longer read. For every kingdom that rose under divine favor, there was another that perished under divine wrath. The priests of Ur-Kem remembered the signs, the trembling earth, the poisoned wells. When their offerings went unanswered, the people turned on their gods, and the gods, it seemed, turned back. Entire generations vanished beneath the weight of their own devotion, leaving only temples filled with offerings no deity would claim. The deeper the scholars dug, the more their discoveries blurred the boundary between myth and memory. Rituals once dismissed as folklore began to mirror real histories, matching astronomical alignments and geological timelines. It was as if the earth itself bore witness to what transpired in those forbidden temples. The stories of kings striking bargains beneath eclipsed moons no longer felt like legend. They felt like confession. One discovery stood apart: a ritual text preserved in salt, its script unlike any other. It spoke of the second dawn, a ceremony meant to bind a ruler's soul with the heart of the sun. Those who performed it would gain immortality not in life but in memory. Their names never forgotten, their deeds never forgiven. The text warned of the cost, yet kings, blinded by glory, always believed they could escape it. History would prove them wrong. It began with a sound, low, rhythmic, almost like breath moving through stone. The team thought it was wind, a trick of the cavern. But when instruments failed and lights flickered, they realized it followed a pattern, a pulse. The ancients had written that their gods slept beneath the earth, waiting for the faithful to awaken them. Now, beneath the sands of Atara, something old was stirring. Not a spirit, not a myth. Something else. The deeper they ventured, the older the world became. Walls breathed with the scent of oil and ash, and inscriptions told stories not meant for human eyes. The king's ritual chamber lay preserved, untouched for thousands of years, but its perfection was unnatural. The air within had not aged. The carvings remained sharp, the offering bowls still filled with hardened resin. It was as if the ceremony had ended only moments ago, waiting for someone to finish what had begun. In their journals, the explorers described strange dreams. They saw cities burning beneath red skies, and voices calling them by names not their own. The symbols carved into the chamber walls appeared in their sleep, rearranging themselves into messages they could not forget. One by one, they began to believe that the king's ritual had not failed. It had merely waited for witnesses to return. History, it seemed, was not a record of the past, but a cycle demanding completion. Then came the discovery that shattered every barrier between myth and fact. A scroll describing the night of renewal. It detailed a ritual to call forth the divine presence once more, using the bloodline of those who first performed it. Q, and T. The scholars dismissed it as legend, until one of them traced their ancestry and found it led straight to the royal house of Atara. The connection was undeniable. The ritual was not history, it was inheritance. That night, the historian dreamed of the altar. He saw the king's eyes open, burning like molten gold. The air around him rippled as voices whispered in forgotten tongues. He awoke with a word engraved in his memory. The same word found on the final page of the scroll. Return. Somewhere between reality and reverence, between discovery and doom, the ritual had already begun again. The more he studied, the less he slept. The scroll spoke not in metaphors, but in instructions. Clear, precise, deliberate. It described the gestures, the chants, even the hour when the veil between worlds was thinnest. He told himself it was academic curiosity, but deep down he felt the pull of something ancient, something that recognized him. The ancients had sought eternal kingship through these rites. Now, across millennia, their heir had finally read their words aloud. When he first performed the gestures, nothing happened. Or so he thought. But the following day, mirrors began to fog when he entered a room. Lights dimmed around him. Words whispered through walls. He dismissed it as exhaustion, the residue of obsession. Yet at night he dreamed of the king again, no longer bound to stone. but standing in his study, wearing the same crown unearthed from the desert. History had stopped being memory. It had become presence. Those who came to check on him found the walls covered in symbols drawn from memory. He no longer spoke in full sentences, but fragments of ritual verse. The air in his home had changed. Thick, charged, metallic. They feared for his mind, but he insisted he was close to something monumental. "The gods never left," he whispered. "They're just waiting for the door." No one realized that door was already open. As night fell, he completed the final passage, the invocation of renewal. The ancient texts had warned, "The king shall rise when the blood remembers." The air trembled. Time itself seemed to warp, and for one fleeting instant, every artifact, every relic, every forgotten name aligned. The past had found its voice again, and through him, it spoke. The next morning, the museum stood silent. Security cameras caught nothing but a blinding flash that lasted 6 seconds. When the staff entered, they found the relic cases shattered, and the air thick with the scent of burnt resin. The historian was gone. Only the crown of Atara remained on the floor, resting in a pool of blackened dust. Yet the recordings captured one final sound before the light. An ancient voice, repeating a single word, clear as thunder: "Return." The story should have ended with his disappearance. Yet within weeks, reports surfaced from every corner of the world. Power grids faltered at the same hour, monuments resonated with inaudible hums, and statues, long thought lifeless, began to weep streaks of salt. The symbols from the Atara scrolls appeared in places untouched by history, scratched into subway walls, imprinted on fogged glass. Scholars dismissed it as coincidence, but those who'd seen the ritual chamber knew better. The king had returned, and his shadow now stretched across centuries. In archives and temples alike, something stirred. Dust-covered scrolls unrolled themselves. Bells rang where no wind blew. Historians began cross-referencing accounts, finding patterns that spanned millennia. Every 3,000 years, a civilization rose to mirror the rituals of the last. Each believed it was unique, chosen, divine. Each was erased by the same silence that followed their final invocation. The pattern was prophecy, and its next chapter had already begun. At night, witnesses across continents reported the same vision. A figure crowned in light standing over cities of fire. His eyes were endless, his voice both human and divine. In every dream, he uttered the same command: remember. The modern world, built on reason, began to fracture under superstition reborn. Governments sought to suppress the panic, but ancient faiths reignited, temples reopened, and in hidden corners, believers began to rebuild the altars of their kings. In the chaos, one truth remained: the ritual demanded completion. Fragments of the original text, scattered across museums and private collections, began to vanish. Surveillance cameras caught figures moving through restricted halls, faces blurred, movements unnatural. The lost rites were being reconstructed, piece by piece, as if guided by an unseen architect. And somewhere, unseen by all, the golden crown of Atara gleamed once more, awaiting its new bearer. As the world teetered on the edge of belief, a final message appeared, broadcast simultaneously across dead networks and forgotten frequencies. It was the historian's voice, distorted, layered, echoing through time. The king is not a man. He is memory, and memory cannot die. Those who heard it felt the air shift, as though the world itself had taken a breath. Then, silence. Across continents, the same sunrise broke, crimson, heavy, and impossibly bright. The first signs were subtle. Compasses spinning, clocks freezing at dawn, and voices whispering through static. Then came the visions. Entire cities saw the same dream. A crown descending from the sky, encircling the earth in light. Scientists called it a global hallucination, Priests called it prophecy fulfilled, but deep below, where ruins met the roots of mountains, an ancient pulse awakened once more. It beat like a second heart beneath the planet, waiting for a voice to answer. Governments united under fear. Secret councils gathered in bunkers, debating how to contain something older than language. Some proposed destroying every relic connected to the lost kingdoms. Others whispered of completing the ritual, believing only through renewal could the balance be restored. The same arrogance that doomed the ancients was reborn. The belief that humanity could command the divine rather than be consumed by it. Above the chaos, survivors and believers formed new sects, claiming to hear the voice of the king guiding them. They built shrines out of steel and glass, mimicking the ancient temples with modern hands. Every night, they gathered under the crimson sky to chant in languages no one had spoken for millennia. Whether by madness or memory, they recited the same words the last kings had spoken before their empires burned. The past was not just remembered, it was being lived again. Among the chaos, one truth seeker refused to surrender to faith or fear. She sought the source, the origin of the pulse, the birthplace of the first ritual. Deep within the shattered sands of Atara, she found what no one had dared to face. The altar itself, still warm, still waiting. In that chamber of dust and silence, she realized the truth. The gods had never demanded blood. It was the kings who did. Mortals who had mistaken hunger for holiness. At dawn, she spoke the final words not as a priest, but as a witness, ending what her ancestors had begun. The earth fell silent. The pulse stopped. Across the world, light steadied, and the red haze faded into morning gold. The reign of memory was broken, and the age of silence returned. Yet, deep beneath the sand, the altar still glowed faintly, as if breathing in sleep. Because history does not end. It only waits to be remembered again. When the silence finally came, the world did not celebrate. It listened. The skies were clear for the first time in months, yet every city carried the weight of what had been awakened. People whispered the name of the lost king like a half-remembered prayer, uncertain whether it was worship or warning. In the calm that followed, scholars began again to write, not of gods or miracles, but of consequence. Humanity had stared into its oldest mirror and seen itself crowned in the same hunger for eternity. In every university and temple, a quiet reconciliation took root. Scientists cataloged anomalies as data. Monks named them omens. The line between faith and knowledge blurred until it vanished entirely. The lost kingdoms were no longer myths, but memories shared by all who survived. The lesson of the kings lingered, that power drawn from fear can raise empires, but only reverence born of understanding can preserve them. Yet beneath the calm, echoes remained. Across the desert, travelers spoke of lights rising from the dunes, of whispers carried on the wind that sounded like distant chanting. The earth remembers every footprint, every drop of blood, every word once spoken in devotion. Perhaps the ritual had not ended, only changed its form, passed from kings to those who tell their stories. For memory itself is the oldest altar of all. In museums, children pressed their hands to glass cases, staring at relics once feared. They asked questions their parents could not answer. Who were the kings? And why did they pray to shadows? And for the first time in history, the answer was spoken without fear, because they were human, just like us. Bound by the same longing to be remembered, the darkness had not been evil. It was simply the reflection of that longing carried too far. And so the story closes, not with an ending, but with remembrance. The kingdoms are gone, their gods silent, their kings reduced to dust. Yet the echoes of their rituals still shape us, reminding every age that power and faith are mirrors reflecting the same desire. To be eternal, Somewhere beyond the dunes, beneath layers of time, the altar waits. It breathes with the earth, patient, unbroken, whispering the same word that began it all: return.